Regular session's over. Could be a special session on the horizon. We're here on This Week in Missouri Politics with Lieutenant Governor Mike Parson. Governor Parson, welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics.
Good to be back, Scott. Great day and good to be here with you.
It is. I was watching the Senate the last day of session, and I saw Democrats and I saw Republicans, and it was heated. There was some personal things. There was a lot of tensions. One thing that everybody thought was how fairly you handled the Senate that day and how you did what you could do to maintain. I think that may have been a key part of keeping it professional, keeping it on the rails. You seem to follow the rules to the letter. Explain your decision making there.
Well, you know, for me, it goes back to the old days, I guess, to my law enforcement days of being a sheriff or serving in the military. There is a structure, there is an organization, and whoever's the leader of that has to maintain that order and has to lead. And I think the last day of session was a perfect example. When you talk about tempers flare, emotions get high, but at the end of the day, somebody has to go up there and abide by the rules and enforce the rules. And that's what I tried to do. And I don't ever look as the senators as a whole. I don't look at them whether they're Democrat, whether they're Republicans. At the end of the day, it's are you abiding by those rules? And are they fair to everyone? And I think it's important. Whoever is the president of the Senate at the time, who's ever in the dais, you treat everybody fairly. And at the end of the day, I think that, I guess in the long term, I think that pays off. I think that's the way the structure works, and that's why we have, we have rules and we have order in the Senate.
Senator Sifton's been credited a lot with running a pretty meticulously effective filibuster, but also there were times you could have not recognized him or went around rules, and I think you came out of the session looking pretty good. But I want to know, how does the difference, you've served in the Senate for 6 years, and you knew what a special session was like and a regular session was like.
Correct.
Break down the difference in strategy.
Well, you know
between
what,
the two.
I think when you go to a special session, one, you have to warrant, does it really even become a special session? Is there cause for it to be a special session? Is it, I want to say, is there an emergency? Is it a high priority? Or is it something you do next year? Because there is a cost to special sessions, number one, but does the issue warrant that? And you got to be careful sometimes that it's not more on emotion than it is on a factual basis. Do we come back? Do you call all the legislators back in, the staff back in for a special session? What is the accomplishments of that? And I think clearly, if you're going to come back for a special session, everyone should have an end game. And I think that's really important when you go into special sessions.
Let's talk a little about the special session stuff, kind of leaving from this session. It was funny to hear Republicans complain about the number of bills passed. I mean, there were some huge bills. I mean, when you entered politics as a sheriff back in '93, I mean, if you'd have just took any one of the bills passed, it probably would have been a wonderful, huge accomplishment for the Republicans.
Yeah, that's true.
I always found it funny to hear people talk about quality of bills versus number of bills.
Yeah, you know what, I don't get wrapped around the issue of how many bills we pass, we don't. I will say this, when they say we pass maybe a record low, 50 some odd bills, that's great. That's what I went up there to do. That's the whole process of why conservatives and Republicans go up there, is to downside government. So if we pass less bills, I'm telling you, to the people of Missouri, that's a good thing. That means we're not regulating, we're not enforcing new laws. And you know, I really think the legislative process, we introduce 2,000 bills a year, Scott, up there, and that's ridiculous. It really is. 2,000 bills, and I don't care who's in charge, 2,000 bills is way too many. So at the end of the day, the media kind of made some stories about, hey, you guys didn't hardly pass any bills this year, you only passed 50 some odd. You know, I'd have to take a good look at them, and that maybe is 40 too many. I don't know.
Maybe the right headline was, congratulations, you only passed 50-some bills. And look at you, way to go.
Good job, you know, as far as I'm concerned. But I think you got to be real careful, because each year that I've been up there, you pass new laws, and people think they're well-intended laws to pass, but at the end of the day, you're adding to the statutes of the state of Missouri.
You logged more hours in the chair running the Senate as Lieutenant Governor than anybody. Even I always like to kind of hang out in the back of the Senate gallery there and talk to the old timers. Right. They said you probably logged more hours in that chair than anybody they've ever seen as Lieutenant Governor. Why'd you make that decision?
You know what? Because it's my job. You know, I've just had that work ethic all my life. That when that job comes about, it's my job to do it. It's not my job to hand it off to somebody else. And I thought it was important for me to be in the chair. One, to give stability to the senators in that chamber, and two, that I learn the process. I've never been in
Yeah.
that position before, so I think it's important you learn. Yeah, there's times up there I would have thought, man, I'd like to be down in the office doing something else than listening. But the
Did you ever
point
get
of
that
it,
itch that you'd rather be on the floor pushing something?
there was occasions I'd like to be out there and says, hey, wait a minute, let me
Yeah.
tell you what's going on here, trying to get things to move. But, I enjoy the position I was in. For me, like I said, it's just work. That's my job, and I'm going to do my job. That's what the Constitution says.
Do you think it mattered that you're the lieutenant governor? You don't have a bill. You're not trying to hurry a bill so you can get to yours as fifth on the calendar and you want to see it come up. I think that maybe lets you be viewed as more of an honest broker because you're not in the fray. You're not a chairman.
Yeah.
You're just
Right.
presiding over the Senate.
There's no doubt when you're in that position and you don't have, I want to say, skin in the game as far as the bills go, that you look at it from a different point of view. My point of it is, hey, I don't care whose bill it is or where it is on the calendar. We're going to work today, and we're going to start going down the list of that calendar. If your bill passes, it passes. If it don't, it doesn't, and we go on with business.
You've been a long-time statesman. I saw some hyperbole, even from news outlets like the Missouri Times, about the Senate and Friday. I've seen the Senate personally far worse. I've seen people cursing on the floor. I think that it looked to me like what you saw the last day of session was both the Republicans and the Democrats wanting to utilize the extremes of the rules to pass a piece of legislation or block it, but it all stayed within the Senate rules, and I've seen the Senate far more acrimonious than it was Friday.
Yeah, I don't know that there was anything new about Friday. I mean, it's just, like I said, it's the end of session, and there's always emotions are high. Everybody's wanting their legislation to pass. I think what everybody needs to take a real good look at sometimes is what the perception of the people that's watching see and what they think. And at the end of the day, how are you conducting yourself as a representative of your district? If I was a senator or rep and I've been in those shoes, I think at the end of the day, you got to remember, hey, I represent these people back home, and I think how I conduct myself is important. And that, because I'm reflecting what the people are back home.
So it was interesting. There was this outstanding video that I think we just credit Jake Scott from Senator Eigel's office from finding initially, and we put it up on the Missouri Times website. It was an old interview of Senator Webster. And he was talking about, I think he said he was one of 8 at the time, which would be similar to today where the Democrats are.
Sure.
That interview was in 1985. You were serving in public office through the worst time in 93 when the Republicans are probably at one of their lowest points.
All right.
I think people that are quick to want to throw away the rules forget that it was not that long ago that the tables were turned, and Senator Webster was one of 8.
That's right, and they could easily turn again someday in the future on that. For the Republican Party and for the conservative agenda, we've had a good year. Yeah. We've had a good 4 or 5 months
Maybe
here.
Great year even.
I mean, I have to say, some of the top priorities that we've passed before finally were signed into law. And I think it was great for us as a party, as conservatives, to get those issues done when it comes to right to work, when it comes to tort reform, even coming to funding education, which is normally a mark against the Republican Party that was like we never do enough. In many, many years, the first time we fully funded education. So I think there's a lot of positive things that happened this year in the legislative process.
Governor Reardon said many times in his end-of-session press conference it was the best start to a conservative administration. I mean, I think people could argue about some of the tactics and things and some of the relationship, but as far as the production of the legislature and the bills that he has signed or seems set to sign, I don't know how you could argue it wasn't an outstanding session for the Republicans. And with one PQ, it looks like they not only were able to preserve the traditions of the state, but also pass a lot of big things.
They did, and I think that's one of the things you're going to see a highlight. Once the dust settles, I want to say, you're going to see more of those issues come out. What we did do, and through the appropriations process, we maintained taking care of our seniors out there, which was a big deal towards the end, making sure we had the money to take care of them. So I think overall it was, you got to give it an A rating for me. I mean, I think it was just a great session, and I think we need to start talking about more focus in, okay, we got next year coming, yesterday's behind us.
There will be a session in January, right?
That's right. And what's in it for tomorrow? That's the way I start looking at it. We've been traveling across the state already since session's been out, talking to people about skilled workforce, about economic development, about jobs. And, I'm looking forward to talking more about that next year.
Well, Governor Parson, thank you for joining us this week in Missouri Politics.
Great to be here, Scott. Thank you. Always enjoy it.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah.
We'll be right back. We have KMOX's Mark Reardon join the Opinion Maker panel after this.
My name is Eric Philippi. I'm a veteran, a carpenter, and a father. When Eric Greitens said he was going to change politics as usual, folks like me didn't think the first thing he'd do as governor was take dead aim at our jobs and our families' livelihoods by working to repeal prevailing wage. Call Governor Greitens. Tell him to protect prevailing wage and to protect my family, not destroy it.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
Nobody likes power outages, including us. That's why Ameren, Missouri is investing in new equipment and smarter technology to reduce outages and keep pace with future needs. And it's working. We're in the top 25% in the nation for reliability. And on average, our rates are 18% lower than other Midwestern states. Making sure the power's there when you need it. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. We're joined for the first time by Republican rising star Hannah Beers, Senator Sylvie's communications director, right?
Yes.
Representative Stephen Roberts, welcome back to the show, sir.
Glad to be here, thank you.
Mark Reardon of Camel-X fame, from the Appalachians to the Rockies and all points in between, right?
Scott, it's nice to be turning the tables on you because you do my show on a regular basis.
Yeah, I know. I've got some good questions for the last part of the show. Mark Dalton with the Carpenters Union, welcome back, sir.
Glad to be here again.
Mark Dalton, the Republicans fully funded the education formula. I think maybe when you look back on session, besides a right-to-work vote, I think what may have the most electoral impact maybe is fully funding the education formula. Is that something that could turn into votes?
I think so. The way it happened was weird. I mean, I don't think it was
Very odd,
originally
yes.
intended that way. But yeah, I mean, it's something that I think has been important to people. And I think, yeah, when they say that they fully funded the formula, I think that's going to hit home with a lot of voters.
Mark Reardon, I enjoy your show on Camel-X because you seem to have a feel for what actual regular people would talk about.
You don't have to suck up.
I see my wife actually listens to your show sometimes.
Yes.
And I think people think one of the things government should do is fund schools.
Yeah.
Can they explain that to folks that they did that?
Well, look, the education funding formula is very complicated. It has, look, if for no other reason, the optics of this are very good for Republicans. It takes away talking points from our hometown paper, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and good friends of ours like on the left, like Jane Duker. The bigger frustration to me, and this may come along in a special session, is I don't think it really addresses the problems in education. I'd like to see education reform, school choice, issues like that be the focus. But yeah, for Republicans, it's a win. There's no doubt about that.
Representative Roberts, it's an interesting thing for places like St. Louis and Kansas City. This won't mean any more money for the schools.
Absolutely, right.
I mean, this will be outstate Missouri schools will actually probably see a little bit of a funding boost. But do you think they can turn that into some suburban districts? I mean, to me, the messaging is pretty easy. They fully funded schools. Maybe that won't matter in Kirkwood where there's competitive races, but can they turn that into votes? And how do you rebut that?
I mean, they're going to try to, but something that, I'm always cognizant of is, last year they cut, $400 million from the original formula?
Sure. Yeah. When there's no money, Hannah Beers, you have to cut, right? But this year, Senator Sylvie was one of the leading people that pushed the funding. I think it's something you can explain to people that I think they expect state government to do. And Representative Frank sat in that chair 2 months ago, and we was talking about vouchers, and he said, how do you say a school is failing when you don't fund your own formula? Right. He said, why don't you fund the formula for a couple of years and see if they pass? That made some sense to me.
No, absolutely. And Senator Sylvie cares a lot about the education formula. He was there in, I believe, 2005 when they first wrote this one. So it was important for him to fund it. Therefore, there were some issues, and HCB 3 came around, but in all, it worked out.
Representative Roberts, SB 43 is a bill aimed at making it either more equitable or more challenging to sue for discrimination issues. You're an attorney yourself. Explain what the practical impact that'll have on Missourians.
I mean, it's terrible, and I think it's a bad message when you're more concerned about the rights of the oppressors versus the rights of the oppressed. I mean, there's so many issues with that bill, from eliminating individual liability. I don't think you can make an argument with a straight face that it's a good idea that we shouldn't hold individuals accountable for their actions. I mean, there's portions where they make that bill makes it the exclusive remedy. I mean, there's really anti-whistleblower protections, where if you're a supervisor in a company and you notice something wrong, you're not protected for speaking out against those kinds of things. I mean, there are so many issues with that bill, and one of the most troubling things for me is how in that situation the House was really treated almost like a subservient body. I mean, you've got a senator who comes in and says, look, no amendments to my bill, and Republican leadership just kind of falls in line behind that. I mean, there were attorneys on both sides of the aisle where we agreed there were issues, but we weren't able to make any changes to this terrible bill.
Mark Reardon, I think the people that support this bill say it's a tort reform bill. It's a pro-business bill that makes it harder to sue business owners, which should make it easier to do business, right?
Yeah, I think that I would respectfully disagree, because I think that this is more or less a tort reform bill, and it's a jobs bill, and it's not making it impossible to sue for discrimination. It's saying that the standards will be on par with the federal standards. So I think it's a good piece of legislation.
Mark Dalton, I hear Republicans say the federal government's bad. Anything Washington's bad. We want outsiders, right? And then I see multiple times this session, well, let's make it something about a Dauber amendment, which I thought would be something fishing in a pond. Something about this, making it similar to the federal standards. I thought the federal government was bad.
You know, it's things in the state capitol can be very hypocritical.
Go figure.
Yeah, we'll just say that. But it's when it caters to their message, then you use that message. If it doesn't cater your message, you use something else. I mean, they on the conservative side, they want more local control, but then they want to override bills and things like the minimum wage that St. Louis passed locally. And then you look at other things when they pass some bills. Say in my case with the carpenters, when they pass right to work, they say half of the other countries doing it, we need to do it too. But then you have PDMP, 49 other states do it, but we don't want to do it. So yeah, things happen to.
Hannah Bridge, do you think Republicans need to have their own state convention decide if local control is good or bad? Just pick one, right? I mean,
listen, it's a popular concept this year. I don't think 43 is a bad piece of legislation, but as a communications person, I think that it has an optics issue. It doesn't look great to voters.
It was one thing I thought was very interesting. As a younger conservative, they did debate the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act, which would have made it illegal to fire folks or actionable to fire people because they were homosexual.
Right.
I think that may be a piece of legislation. It was funny. You could almost watch the world change through the people's elected representatives. I know some folks were frustrated, but that when Kevin Engler, who brought that to the floor, when he first got elected, he would have never been allowed to offer that amendment. Really, when he probably first got elected to the House, he would have never had that debate. The world has moved a long way, and that seems to be a piece of legislation that will be a big debate next year.
It probably will be. We'll see.
Your first year in the legislature, I wonder what your take was. Were you like, this is ridiculous, this should already be law? Or, I mean, the institutional piece of it is this concept has went a long way from when Jolie Justice was working on it 5-10 years ago.
Absolutely, and I will say, first, it's the best job I've ever had, but I will say I was very impressed. I mean, I think that the Republican Party is going to make that a priority. I think we'll have Mona on the floor next year, and I think that's one step in the right direction for our state.
Mark Reardon, is this an issue the Republicans need to get out of the way on? I mean, it is something that the world is changing on them.
I think so, absolutely, and I think that the world is changing. Missouri's it's an evolving, state of mind for a lot of people in the state. So I think the Republicans should probably evolve the way that the rest of the country has. We're a little bit slower to do that in this state. I mean, I would have been all for it years ago, but there are some members of the party that I guess feel the need to be a little bit more cautious. So I think there are good things, and there's a positive outlook for that in the future. See, on this we agree.
Yeah.
Unity.
There we go. Let's get it done.
James here.
Bring people together, Scott.
Mark Dalton, I thought it was a particularly deft move by the Speaker to have that debate inside the SB 43 debate. I mean, you can argue it's a business issue. You can argue it's a civil rights issue. But having that encapsulated in that debate seemed like a very deft move, and I believe that there's a commitment next year to have a vote on the floor.
No, I would think so. I mean, I think even within the majority of the Republicans, I think you have to, it's like the old saying, you have to adapt and change with the times, or else you're going to be left behind. And I think this is an issue that falls right in that category.
Hannah, you've had a week off. Now special session is talked about.
Yeah.
There were a lot of things in the governor's State of the State speech that the legislature didn't get to. That's very normal for a State of the State speech. With Governor Nixon, I don't think they ever got to any of the things he said for the most part. If they did, they tried to act like they didn't. It was interesting. He made his press conference was pretty combative to the legislature. He said that when you don't finish your work during regular session, he compared him to third graders. Well, we know third graders have to go to summer school. Right. So what do you think happens at summer school?
Look, the governor has the authority to call a special in extraordinary circumstances. I would hope that whatever he does call actually is extraordinary circumstances. I think policy changes right now aren't really extraordinary, and they can wait until the next term. But I'm not sure how well the legislature will play ball after they've been called petulant third graders.
So the interesting part to me was I thought that this would have been easy to explain if Real ID had not been passed.
Oh,
Senator
absolutely.
Sylvie carried that bill. I do think regular conservatives who care about government, if they show up in an airport and can't get on their plane, that's when they're done. That's when they're mad. That made some sense to me. Maybe there's an economic development bill for the Boot Hill for some jobs that wouldn't be good in January. Do you think that provides him some urgency to call on a few other things?
Yeah, I think that one would definitely be worthy of a special.
Representative, so you've been called a third grader by your governor. The House has, I don't think that maybe was aimed at the House. They've done, I'm not sure what more he wants the House to do on his agenda. They pretty much did whatever he asked for. Have you heard any of your colleagues, and how was that taken by them?
Haven't heard too much about it from our side because, when we're super minority in both the House and Senate, I think the buck kind of stops on that end of the aisle. On the House, I think they were very effective in pushing their agenda, what they wanted to do, getting out in the House. Where things really got clogged up was over on in the other chamber in the Senate.
Mark, it's interesting. Conservatives want less laws. Conservatives they don't, 80 bills is probably, 80 too many to a lot of conservatives. You say this at Lincoln Day, you say it on the campaign trail, less government, now you get it. You're welcome, right?
Well, look, I'd be happy if these guys, ladies and gentlemen, would only go up there like every 3 years, and I understand that the process is, and not pass any laws. I always tell this story. There was a guy, man, I wish I remembered his name. He was from Ashland, Missouri, and he never introduced a piece of legislation at all. And I thought that was crazy until I realized more people should probably do that. Look, I think that if you go back to the state of the state, there are things, though, left on the table from the governor's agenda. I think everyone knows there is going to be a special session or 2 or 11. I don't know what the title would be. And, the cynical part of that would be he wants to do that for future political reasons. The issue in the Boot Hill would be the one that would have urgency because you're talking about hundreds of jobs. And I also think that it's my understanding that was very close, and they just ran out of time last week.
Mark Dalton, to me, if you look at some of the things he said he wanted and some of the things you heard coming from him, I think it's every bit his right to call special. It's also the legislature's right to come up and adjourn. They both have constitutional obligations there that they can uphold or not uphold. They can pass legislation. I do think, though, if it was just about issues that didn't get passed by the legislature, that would be challenging. The Boot Hill economic development thing gives some urgency. I wonder if you do abortion. There was a paycheck protection bill that did not move. There was a couple other things, I think, were PDMP, something he's mentioned that did not move. Mm-hmm. I wonder if he puts a bunch of those things together or if he kind of does them piecemeal.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he does. I think, I agree with everybody up here. I think the jobs in the Boot Hill is a priority. I know every time the governor speaks, it's about creating jobs and higher paying jobs for Missourians. That is one that falls into it. Other things are, policy issues that traditionally you would work on and craft and get a better bill to introduce next session.
Margaret, if you want to go to his critics, they might say vain or ambitious or arrogant. These are folks that he doesn't have to help down in the Boot Hill, that he would be choosing to help and probably having to be challenging to do it. I think maybe this is one that whichever side of Eric Reardon you're on, if he can bring home a factory, that's a win no matter who the governor is or what party they're from.
Yeah, absolutely, it's a win. And look, I hate to be a talk show host, so I'm cynical all the time, but I think that this is one of the goals, and he campaigned on this. He wants to help people. It would help people. So I think that one's absolutely a no-brainer. The only question is, does it get, brought up for a special session? I think it will, because I think everybody knows that something's going to happen here, and he's going to, whether it's for optics or not, he wants to drag these guys back in for a nice summer vacation.
Quick predictions: does prescription drug monitoring get put in that special call?
No.
Do we see a special session on that?
I don't know that answer, but I hope it does, because I think that's one that's a no-brainer. I also think they're close on that one.
I'm going to say no. What do you think?
I think yes.
What do you think?
I'm going to say no. It was really close, but I don't think it's extraordinary circumstances at the moment.
I wonder, will there be, besides jobs of the Boot Hill, what else would he have? Would it be the abortion bill?
The abortion bill, possibly utilities.
Yeah. What do you think? Abortion bill goes into that? You know they can PQ abortion, right? The one thing they've proven is they can PQ an abortion bill.
If they want it, they'll do it.
What do you think? I think if they want to PQ something and they want session to go smooth, that probably gets put in.
Probably, and then prevailing wage too. So
Prevailing wage could be in there. Mark Dalton, I think there was some compromise worked out on a lot of these issues that were close. Does a special session change that dynamic?
I think it's hard to predict what the governor will call special session for, because I think it's hard to predict anything he's doing. It's just so different than what the norm is. So, I think some of these issues will be put in there, and he'll try to really, push the needle on some of them.
Last wild card, the national news has been overwhelming this week. The FBI director gone last week. A special prosecutor, Robert Mueller, comes in. Do you think they find anything on Trump?
I think there's a lot of stuff there. I think they do. I think at this point, that's just.
Do you think they find a connection at the end of the day?
I think they're not going to stop, and by they, I don't even mean the Justice Department. I mean the prevailing media. They won't stop until they do. I don't think they'll find stuff on the president directly. I really don't. I think that it will be perhaps on the surrogates or the other players, but I don't think it'll be tagged to him in the long run.
You think it reaches the Oval Office?
I do. And there's a saying, tell me who you're with, and I'll tell you who you are. I think there's definitely, just to say these people he's surrounded himself with aren't involved is.
What do you think, in the day?
I'm not sure if they do or don't, but I do know that if they do, Republicans are going to have a game plan. I think we can come out of it alive, but it'll have to be a strategic move.
It's going to be bad for the party, even if they find folks close to the president that we're maybe doing double. With a minute left, who won the week?
I'm going to say Representative Scott Fitzpatrick. Getting up on the last day, 5 minutes before session ends, and allowing a vote that he didn't want to happen. I think it showed true leadership.
Yeah. What do you think?
I think Senator Romine got what, in my interpretation, is the worst piece of legislation we passed this year across. He was able to do it through the House with no amendments.
So he won through the backside, what you're saying?
Yeah.
Who won the week, Mark?
I think Jim Comey, because if for no other reason, he's got a lot more material for his book deal.
Oh, man. I don't read a lot. That won't surprise you, but I would read that.
I think Eric Greitens won the week. With all the turmoil going on around the president and talks of impeachment, that gets Eric Greitens one step closer to D.C. where he really wants to be.
That means our previous guest would be governor, so we maybe give him credit. I'm going to say Scott Sifton won the week because that was one of the best filibusters I've ever seen done. It was like a Swiss watch how he moved through the Senate. And I want to thank, before we go, the Clayton Ladue Rotary Club for having us over this week. Very much enjoyed it. And we'll see you next week on This Week in Missouri Politics. This Week in Missouri Politics, brought to you by Spire and Sterling Bank.